Hello and welcome to Ronnie the Reader. So today we are going to be starting a new vlog. In this video, we're going to be reading 3 books in this video. All 3 are going to be some male-male romance. One is going to be an adult book. The first book that we're going to read in this is going to be Something Wild and Wonderful by Anita Kelly. We're then going to move on to a YA romance named I Like Me Better by Robbie Weber. And then finally, the third book we're going to read is another YA, and it's going to be Lose You to Find Me by Eric J. Brown. So I'm just going to kind of go through each book and give you a little bit of a synopsis of them, and then we'll jump into the vlog portion. All right, so the first book that we're going to be reading in this particular video is going to be Something Wild and Wonderful by Anita Kelly. This book is following 2 men who are hiking the Pacific Trail on the west coast of the United States, and they kind of get connected through kind of circumstance and happenstance, and end up walking a portion of the trail together and end up developing a relationship that progresses to maybe something a little bit more than friends. It is an adult book, so there is a little bit more of adult language and adult scenes in this particular book. So you'll kind of see some of that during the vlog portion. The second book that we read is I Like Me Better by Robbie Weber, and this one is following a senior in high school named Zach who is becoming the star player or the captain of his soccer team during his senior year, but he ends up taking the fall for a prank that one of his teammates does, who is graduated but's going off to college, so he's worried about losing his scholarship. It is, like I said, YA, dealing with more teenagers, dealing a lot more with kind of not first loves necessarily, but kind of getting into relationships maybe under false pretenses. What are you exactly supposed to do for friends, maybe not friends, just like delving into those aspects. And then finally, the third book and the most recent one that I finished is Lose You to Find Me by Eric J. Brown. This one is following the story of our 2 main characters. We have Tommy and Gabe, and they actually knew each other when they were middle schoolers in, I think, 6th grade, going to the same summer camp for a couple of weeks. And they were like best friends, and then Gabe ended up leaving summer camp slightly early, and Tommy never really heard from him again. And now they are seniors in high school, and Gabe ends up working at the retirement community that Tommy is working at as like waiters for their nightly dinner services. And so they're like reconnecting as Tommy is training him and kind of figuring out what they mean to each other, because Gabe was Tommy's like sexual awakening, essentially, what made him realize that he was gay. So we'll get into the vlog portion of this video. Now, full disclosure, I did film the portion of the video for Something Wild and Wonderful last summer. So it has been quite a while since I read that one, but then I just recently have finished I Like Me Better and Lose You to Find Me. And you can hear links all the way back there, can't you? All right, let's jump into the vlog portion. And I'm now 58% of the way through it. So I was thinking of giving a percentage or an update at 25 and then 50%. I didn't feel like I had anything to say at the 25% mark. And so now, being just over halfway through, I am enjoying this book overall. It is following the story that's outlined in the plot, but I think there is some interesting kind of topics discussed. What I'm really enjoying, and this is like a mild spoiler, but there's a lot of discussion around faith and kind of how that impacts a queer person growing up. And as someone who does not believe in God or is not exactly a religious person, it's just always interesting to me as like a very non-religious person who did not grow up religious and does not really have a lot of exposure into that world, to kind of hear stories or see stories about people who are very religious. That is an interesting aspect, and one that I am enjoying and was not expecting. I would say overall right now, I think the writing is good. There's nothing that's super like cliche or like cringe-worthy. We did have some more steamy scenes occur at about the 40 or 45% mark, I believe, and we're now kind of, we're just over halfway through. I don't think we're really at the climax yet, so I think something else is going to be happening. I am enjoying the characters of Ben and Alexia. They are a little kind of like over the top, a bit cartoonish. Well, Ben is a little bit more cartoonish, and Alexia is very like stereotypical brutish or brooding kind of character. And so, it's not exactly the most like riveting content in the world, and like, it's not probably winning any literary prizes, but it's a fun engaging, cute, heartwarming story so far. So I'm definitely intrigued to see how it ends, because this could really go. Right now I'm kind of sitting at like a 4, and I don't think it's going to be a full 5. I don't know, I haven't connected to it fully to really give it that 5-star rating at this point. At this point, depending on the ending, I could really see it going either like 3.5 if I'm just not a fan of the ending, or being like a solid 4 or 4.5-star read. So definitely intrigued, definitely have liked everything so far, and I'll give you an update once I finish the book and kind of my final rating and my final thoughts. Yeah, I'll talk to you in just a little bit, whenever I finish that, which probably will be tonight. I've been listening to this while I'm at work, like in the evening time, and first night I got like 35-ish% of the way through, and then last night I got to 58% of the way through, because I did speed it down just a slad to 1.75 speed and not 2 point. Probably will be able to finish it tonight if I really push and kind of listen through it, like probably before and after work too. I don't know if I'm going to do that. I'm not exactly rushing through the story. I'm not in like any need or hurry to finish it up. So yeah, whenever I do is when I do, but that doesn't really matter because it's going to instantly jump to that clip for you now. So there you go. All right. Hello. It is now a couple of days later, and I have finished Something Wild and Wonderful by Anita Kelly, and I'm here to give you some final thoughts. So first, I feel like I should start with a rating, and I actually finished this book a couple of days ago. I ended up, I think, settling on a rating of 3.5 stars for this particular book. I was kind of going back and forth. Something that I kind of discovered while reading this book is, I don't know if I'm a fan of sex scenes too much in romance books. Like, if I'm reading like a smutty book where like I know there's good, like, it's just like kind of about the sex, like, that's fine. But even then, I'm like, I don't really read that like often, maybe like once a year, once every other year. It's not something that I would say, reach for frequently at all. And it's not that I don't mind sex scenes, but when I am reading a romance book, I am reading it for more of like that cute, sweet, like romancy vibe, and not necessarily so much the like sexy times. Not that I'm against it or that I am not going to read it, but there was just something about some of the sex scenes in this book that just like turned me off. And when they started like hooking up, I just kind of got less interested and kind of lost some investment overall. And I don't know why that was or why that is. And, I definitely think that did affect my final enjoyment and final rating of this book overall. Another thing that kind of annoyed me throughout the book was about, I would say, like at the 45 and then like the 75% mark, like right exactly around the same-ish mark within the book, the same thing happens where our main character Alexi, or one of our main characters Alexi, gets like super spooked about kind of just like his feelings for Ben, and his like struggling identity, knowing who he is, all of that stuff. And he ends up leaving Ben. Like when they're hiking, he like leaves Ben in the middle of this like motel after the first time they hook up. And then again, towards the end of the book, he leaves him. I won't say exactly what, I guess, for like, I don't want to like spoil it specifically, but he ends up leaving Ben again, which actually led to one of my more, or one of the sections of the book that I enjoyed slightly more, but I still found it tad annoying, because after he leaves, a lot of the rest of the, or not a lot of the rest of the book, but like a good, another 10 to 15% of the book until you kind of reach that very end section is basically Alexi writing letters to kind of those important to his life. So he writes a letter to his mom and his dad, his sister. He writes a couple of letters to Ben, and then you also kind of intersplice that with letters that Ben has written back to him. And some letters are sent and some letters are unsent, which was like the annoying part I found to me, because there would be like big kind of revelations for the characters, but then it would be like an unsent letter. It does have a happy ending, the book, like they do get back together, but I just don't feel as though they were ready for that. So there is like a huge time jump, I would say. So the book starts, I think, in like March or April, and then like that big like ending scene where Alexi leaves Ben for the second time, I think, is supposed to take place in June, I want to say. And so they kind of like have, those 3 to 4 months where you're like reading about the beginning of the relationship, and then the letters take place over the rest of the summer, and then they don't see each other again until September. And so I think you're supposed to kind of feel like they've worked through their feelings and are ready to be a couple, which I do agree with, because I don't think that the people they were at the beginning of the book and throughout the middle would have led to a successful or healthy relationship. I do like they had some time apart to grow, but I don't feel like they could have jumped right back into a relationship. You know, I feel like they have to kind of be friends, and I really kind of feel like Alexia is the character, which obviously the book is a romance book, so like this wouldn't make sense. Maybe it was like just a like slice of like literary fiction book about like a man's like coming out story of acceptance of itself and acceptance of his identity. He would have kind of been single for a while and maybe gone on other dates and kind of like been friends with Ben, instead of this book ending with them just kind of jumping right back into a relationship. That was slightly annoying. And that, all is to say, is kind of what ended up at my 3.5-star rating. This definitely wasn't bad. There was no, like, I wouldn't say there was any super like problematic elements that came up. As I said before, the discussions of kind of faith and like being in a non-heterosexual couple, or just like identity in general, which is like not the traditional norm, you know, that discussion of those two things was really interesting. I found it to be very fascinating. I don't know if the author is religious of any sort. I don't know if, you know, people who do have kind of like non-hetero identities that are religious like found about the, I guess, representation, even though that's like, you know, of all of the kind of reps that we could potentially have, I feel like that's not high up on the list. Anyway, I did enjoy those discussions, but just overall, I think the topics covered, like, some of them were covered well, some of them were covered maybe a little more haphazardly, but there's nothing directly or overtly, like, negative being said throughout the narrative about any of these sorts of topics, so that's good. But that's kind of my final thoughts. 3.5 stars overall. Definitely a fine book. It's not something that I would maybe kind of reach for again, obviously, or, you know, I probably would recommend it. I think it's a fine story. It's a kind of a quick read, although it did take me kind of a while just because I did lose interest kind of about halfway there, like just over the halfway point. I'm now 50% into the way of I Like Me Better by Robbie Weber. I think it's Weber. And basically this book follows the story of a soccer player named Zach who basically takes the fall for a prank that one of his teammates on the soccer team plays. So he now is kind of thrown into this like summer where he has to complete community service. He also is trying to be the like captain of his soccer team moving forward, like after this summer, basically, like he's going into his senior year of high school. I don't know if I'm explaining the synopsis well. I just kind of want to jump right into my thoughts on this book because I am, like I said, 50% of the way through and I do have some thoughts so far. The first one being, I don't know if I necessarily like Zach, our main character. I think he is written to be a bit of a not unlikable character, but a character who we're meant to see kind of the conflict in. And it's this conflict of being the star athlete, being super confident, and being kind of what everyone wants of him, versus the fact that he really is maybe not so much of a confident person. He's someone who kind of defaults to whatever the other people around him want him to be. And so that's creating an interesting reading experience. And it's something that threw me off a little bit. And at first I was like, well, it feels like we're reading two separate characters. I think that is kind of the point of the character. Maybe I'm like reading into that. Maybe I'm missing maybe more of a greater point. That's kind of what I have thought so far reading Zach. His main love interest he meets at the summer institute that he's doing, and his name is Chip. And so far they've had some pretty meaningful interactions. One thing that is making me like not slightly well, maybe slightly uncomfortable is the right phrasing for it, is Chip has kind of let Zach know on multiple instances that he's not interested in like dating him or pursuing a relationship with him. Meanwhile, every time Zach kind of hangs out with Chip, he's like, right, we're just friends. Like he only wants to be friends. He's just my friend. He doesn't want anything more, blah, 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 blah. all of this other stuff. So it's getting a little bit, one, like repetitive, and two, like not creepy. It's not in a creepy sense that like Zach is like constantly like going after Chip. They are meeting kind of in organic ways. And I think now that we're at the 50% mark, we are at a point more in the book where Chip has started to develop more strong feelings for Zach. The big thing that's like keeping them apart right now, sorry, my hair, I don't know what's going on with it. Like, it's just not looking good. But the big thing that is going on right now, and this is like maybe a slight spoiler, Zach took the fall of this like prank that he did for his friend Ryan, who was a graduating senior from the soccer team. And now Ryan is going off to college, and he asked Zach if he can get one of his teammates to take the fall for him, whereas Zach just decides to do it himself for this prank, where he actually puts a dead shark in, I think, like a locker or something for their rival sports team. Chip, who's like this super into marine biology, he's super into marine biology. He's, you know, at this institute more full time, really into like animals and wanting to protect the environment, all that stuff. He kind of has this like image of Zach. At least that's what Zach's projecting. He's like, if only like Chip knew that I was covering for Ryan, then he, you know, wouldn't hate me and would want to date me, essentially. And then there's also this instance of Chip and Ryan actually being cousins. And then there's all of this plot threads going on in the 50% mark so far of like parent expectations as well, with Zach's dad being like a former varsity soccer player and wanting to like push Zach. And we have met Chip's parents as well at this point, who are pushing him to be this like star soccer or tennis player, or at least his mom is. His dad is a little bit more so like, whatever you want to do, whatever's going to make you happy, you know, kind of that stuff. So to get to my actual thoughts and kind of just like non-plot related things, I am liking the book. I did read this author's first book, If You Change Your Mind, last year in 2023. It was the first book that I started off with in the year, and I did enjoy it. I think it was like a 4-star read. This one I am enjoying. I wish it was moving slightly faster. I generally am someone who when I read a romance, I like my characters to typically have gotten together by the 50% mark. Not gotten together, but have had more romantic interactions. And we've really only gotten like one, not even romantic, but kind of like full, like, I don't know, like one scene with Chip and Zach where I was like, okay, we're moving towards something. All the other ones have just kind of been like banter, building it up. And I get that's important, but I just kind of feel like at this point in the story, like I wish there was a little bit more further development. It does feel like 50% we've kind of wrapped up a plot line. It's like subplot of Zach having this like rivalry with this boy on his team named Noel. And so like, I don't know, that was also like weird characterization. Zach, like I said, he's not that likable, and he's just putting all of this like pressure on himself to be captain, and he's really just like doing anything he thinks that will get him this captain spot. And he really is failing to see like how manipulative Ryan is, and how the other people don't like Ryan and like don't look up to him as this like god that Zach does. And listen, I've never been in the position where I was the star athlete and like the one, you know, like team like builder, leader, captain, like whatever, of like leading the team all the way through and like through the charge, blah blah blah, all of this stuff. So maybe I'm just like having a hard time relating and sympathizing with Zach in this plight, but it feels like this man does not like soccer that much, to be honest. And so I'm ready for him to just like let all of that go. And again, I'm only the 50% mark, so maybe all of that will, you know, like be further progressed in the second 50% half. And I'm not saying that I dislike this book. Like, if I had to rate it at the 50% mark, it would definitely be a 4. It still has potential to maybe go up to a 5. I'm just very curious to see how the rest of the book goes, how the romance progresses. You know, we're waiting for kind of the other shoe to drop with the prank of, like, it actually being Ryan to come out. So we'll see when that goes down. We'll see how Zach handles it. Yeah, that's what I'm feeling 50% through. Kind of check back in, maybe at the 75% mark, like right before we hit the ending, or I might just do a final check-in after we finish with the second 50% mark. We'll see. Okay, I am back. I just got out of the shower, so I'm going to be combing my hair a little bit during this clip. But I have finished I Like Me Better, and I actually finished it a couple of days ago, if I'm being honest. At this point, it was 2 days ago that I finished it. And really, the reason that I haven't made any sort of update or anything yet is because I truly don't know what my final thoughts are or how to summarize my final thoughts in general about the book. I gave it 4 stars overall, but I just don't feel like I have that much to say more so than what I've already said in the last clip, just like describing this book. It was a cute story. It didn't have any major flaws or super annoying character beats or character moments. The character arcs were full. You know, there's nothing that really leaves you unsatisfied, I would say, throughout this book. I don't know, but there's just something about it that wasn't a full 5 star. Like, it didn't leave me, like, I don't know, I guess just fully invested at all times. I think it has a lot to do with kind of our main character just like being a little bit unlikable. And like I said in last clip, that's kind of by design. He is definitely not someone that is supposed to be this like perfect Prince Charming. He has flaws that he works through. And so does every character in this book. I would say that's actually one of the strengths of the book, is that each character has something that they're needing to work through, and they kind of don't exactly get through it completely, obviously, because that's really not how the real world works, but they definitely make significant character growth. And I would say that they are better people by the end of the story than when you like find them in the beginning. But I don't know, there's just something lacking or missing, and I can't quite put my finger on what exactly it is. I'm having a really hard time formulating and finding my final voice and final thoughts for the book completely, like as a whole. I think that the romance was good, it was well done, it was well executed, it had satisfying points to it. I will say I still do find the beginning to be slightly creepy, with Zach not just kind of letting go of Chip like not being into him at first. But eventually, it gets there, and you kind of see their flirting and their banter progress throughout the book. So I don't know. I don't know what else to say, and I'm having a really hard time. And I feel like that's the worst thing when you're doing like a reading vlog or a review for a book, is when you just don't feel like you can formulate your words coherently into really what you're feeling, or what like accurately describes the book for you. Like, all I can tell you like confidently and 100% is that the book is 4 stars. Why and for what reasons, I have not thought of yet, or I can't really discern. I mean, I guess I have a little bit of telling you slightly. Actually, I don't even know. Have I said anything slightly negative? I mean, there is nothing like super negative to come out of this book. It was good. Like, it was just good. It was good. It was fine. I think his first book is slightly better, although I gave them both 4 stars, so they're very on par with each other. If you're looking for a male specific romance, like, they're just good. They're affable, serviceable, good. I am glad that younger teens and older teens and adults can kind of have these sorts of books to turn to now, and they're much more readily available. In general, like, you don't have to kind of secretly seek these kinds of books out. Like when I was a teenager and I was discovering my sexuality and I was like getting into reading male books, all that was out there was like super smutty stuff that I could find, or like very like poignant, just like super sad and depressing stories about like older generations struggles with being homosexual, and that it wasn't a good time all of the time. Even back then when I was 13, 14, 15, I guess a little bit later than that, more like 15, 16, 17, and that would have been like 2013, 14 and 15, around there. So we definitely have made huge strides already within just like the last 10 years as far as like happy, just like cutesy, adorable romance books that you can get your hands on at the YA or teen level that are not straight heteronormative couples. So that really has nothing to do with this book specifically, other than just like it being a part of that group and me happy about that. But yeah, I think that's gonna wrap it up for me for this book for I Like Me Better. So we are gonna start moving on to the final book that I'm gonna be reading for this video. And I actually own that one physically now, and that's gonna be Lose You to Find Me by Eric J. Brown, which I read All That's Left in the World last year by Eric J. Brown and loved it. So I'm super excited to see what I think of this. And this was not intentional, but I'm now going to be reading each book in this video in a different format. I listened to Something Wild and Wonderful via audio, read I Like Me Better as an ebook, and now I'm going to be reading the physical copy of Lose You to Find Me. So yeah, we're going to jump into this. I'll formally introduce it in the next clip with a synopsis and everything, but closing out I Like Me Better. Hopefully by the time I do an outro for this video, I will have better thoughts on this book. Maybe I'll read some reviews, see what other people are thinking, and try to get some of those ideas formulated for myself. But yeah, that is it for now. So next time you see me, we'll be discussing this one, Lose You to Find Me. Super excited to dive into this. Alright, so I am now 50% into my way of the last book of this video. This is Lose You to Find Me by Eric J. Brown, and this book is following our main character named Tommy, who is working as a waiter in a retirement community in Florida, I think is the state that they're in. Actually, I'm now not sure, but not super important. Basically, the conceit of this book, or the kind of main premise plot, Tommy had a crush on his first male major friend named Gabe. He met Gabe and they were friends during a summer camp when they were both in 6th grade. Like, I think it was the summer in between 5th and 6th grade. And now the story that we are following is their senior year. It's the fall of their senior year of high school. And Gabe is working at retirement community. He has now become a waiter. So Tommy has to start training him, and it kind of resurrects old feelings. And right now, like I said, I'm about 50% of the way through, and so that is on page 182. Without spoiling too much, because I am going to have a little bit of a spoiler section during this first update, because my main thoughts of this book are a bit spoilery, but I will say I was enjoying it for a little bit, and I'm still enjoying it for the most part, but there is a specific plot point or trope that's being used in this book that I am not a huge fan of, and so I am going to be talking about that spoilery, and that's, I mean, I think I'm just going to get into that, so, like, I'll put a spoiler warning, you know, on the screen for you, but really all I have to discuss about this is that kind of specific plot point. So, spoilers starting now. So if you have read this book, or if you've not read this book and you're just watching with the spoilers, the first like 100 or so pages, you are following Tommy and Gabe as they are building this relationship. Gabe initially pretends not to remember Tommy and their friendship that they shared when they were in middle school at this summer camp. And so Tommy's a little hurt by that, but they start to get close. They're doing the classic flirty banter things, you know, texting, staying up late watching movies together, flirting at work, you know, all of that cute, fun stuff. And then Tommy ends up hanging out with Gabe after they both leave a party, and they go back to Gabe's house, and Gabe finally admits that he did remember Tommy, and he did actually like just lie initially when they first met out of like fear of embarrassment essentially. And then they share a sweet kiss, and I'm like, oh my god, this is like not a slow burn, because Eric J. Brown's other book that I loved so much, All That's Left in the World, was a super, super slow burn. And so I was like, this is like very different, you know, that's very like post-apocalyptically sci-fi with a bit of a romance. This is much more straight contemporary romance. But then right after they kiss, Gabe drops the little bombshell that he has a boyfriend. And already just right there, I really dislike that trope of one of our main love interests already being in a relationship. It's a bit of a cheating plot line. It's like a cheating storyline. It is, in my opinion. He kissed, physically, like cheating. Physically, he kissed Tommy. And also emotionally, he was for sure cheating on his boyfriend. And Gabe says it's complicated, like you don't understand, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, that just really annoyed me. And so then I kept reading. And this is all like right now, by the way. Like, like I went through the first 50% of this book. I keep reading, and then we eventually meet Gabe's boyfriend, and he's kind of introduced to be like a bit of a dick. Like, he seems to be at least 21 years old, where our main characters are 17, so that's already a little icky and weird. And he was a dick to our main characters and his friends, and then he basically threatens Tommy of like, don't do it again. But Tommy is like, oh, I'm gonna show Gabe that like I'm a better boyfriend, because Gabe says that him and Vic's relationship is complicated and I don't understand. And I'm just really, really hating that, and it's making me really dislike Tommy. I really dislike Gabe at this point. Like, I'm not actively rooting for them to be together. And another, maybe one of my, toxic traits, Tommy is consistently hooking up with this boy named Brad in the book. So before the book starts, and like before him and Gabe's relationship kind of goes back up, like they meet again and they start reconnecting, Tommy says that he and Brad, who is this like closeted hockey player at his high school, have hooked up a couple of times at some parties over the last year or so, and that Tommy's best friend Ava ends up catching them, and so she's like the only one who knows the secret about Brad, that him and Tommy do hook up. So that's like referenced once, and then I think you meet Brad in a couple of scenes, and then now, since the whole reveal of Gabe's relationship, we have actually gotten confirmation that Tommy and Brad have had sex, and then they do hook up, not on page, but they start hooking up, and then it's kind of like a fade to black situation in this. It's alluded to, I think, that we're supposed to be led to believe that Tommy and Brad lost their virginities to each other. And not that it's like, I think the concept of virginity is kind of dumb, and like losing your virginity and all that stuff. It's like something that society really like puts pressure on people. But it can be used as a way of like showing emotional closeness, and I think that's what it's alluding to in the story. And honestly, even before like all of this happened, I was kind of low-key rooting for Brad. I was like, he's really cute, he's a super shy kid, kind of figuring out his sexuality. He is being also a little bit toxic in what seems to be like he is using Tommy just for kind of physical experimentation. But ever since then, we have gotten little glimpse that it seems like Brad does actually care for Tommy maybe a little bit more than what they're doing. And I kind of hope that's the way the story goes. Like, I'm sorry, I can't actively root for Tommy and Gabe to be together at this point. And, I didn't put any context into the name of the book, but Lose You to Find Me, like initially thinking about it, you're like, oh, they were separated, and now they're like fated to come back together, because that's a whole nother theme throughout this whole first half of the book. But actually it could be that they are just not meant to be together, and through this relationship, Tommy realizes that maybe Brad is like actually what he needs. And so that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm rooting for in the rest of this book so far, is for Tommy and Brad to get together, because I'm just not a fan of like cheating plot lines and cheating storylines, especially in romance books. Like, I'm sorry, I can't root for our main character to get with this guy because this guy has a boyfriend and he's cheating on his boyfriend emotionally and has cheated physically with this guy, and now the main character is like, I'm gonna be a way better boyfriend and I'm gonna steal this boy. Like, I just don't like it. I am not a fan. So I honestly don't know how the second half of this book is gonna go for me, how it's gonna fare. Like, I don't think I can give it 5 stars at this point, and it was on track to be a 4 or 5 star rating at the very least, because it's super cute, it's well written, it feels a bit realistic. I really think that Eric Jakes Brown does a great job at writing kind of realistic teens, and it's not super cringy or like unrealistic in a way. The dialogue is pretty witty and funny at times, and it feels like these characters have gone to school with a while, and have worked together for a while, and have kind of organic relationships. You know, there is that certain aspect of everyone having like one or two characteristics that are really turned up for the emphasis of characterizing them, when real people are obviously much more dynamic and have much more facets to themselves. But you know, for being a YA book, frankly, like I think he does such a good job of like creating those characters that feel pretty real but still have distinguishing qualities that kind of make them pop a little bit more. So that's where I'm at with this book. I honestly don't know if I'm going to keep reading tonight and like finish it. Like I could finish it tonight if I wanted. But I don't know if I want to, because I'm mad. Like I'm a little angry. And so yeah, I'm just like I don't know. Like and now I'm wanting this main romance to be between like Brad and Tommy, and like all of the Tommy and Gabe scenes, I'm just like rolling my eyes at this point and like getting super pissed off at. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. All right, it's now a few days later, and I have finished Lose You to Find Me. I finished this about a day or so ago at this point. And ultimately, I gave this book a 4-star rating. I did enjoy it a lot. Now, I know that my last clip didn't really have a lot of updates outside of spoilers. So as far as just like a quick little summary review, which I think that this book is good and is definitely very different than Eric J. Brown's first book. So if you're thinking about picking this up, I still would definitely recommend it. I think it's still a great YA male-male romance, and still kind of gives you some of the things that you are looking for within a YA male-male romance. But ultimately, a lot of what I have to discuss about this book does have to do with very plot-specific and plot-centric things, so there is a bit of a spoiler. So as far as a final review, this is it for now. I am going to go jumping more into spoilers at this point. So if you don't want to see that, just move forward to the very last end of this video, the very wrap up of everything, and then, you know, we can discuss later. But spoiler discussion is going to be starting in 3, 2, 1. Okay, getting into spoilers for Lose You to Find Me. So like I said in my 50% update portion of the video, I was really rooting for Tommy and Brad to get together, and that did ultimately happen. So I was definitely happy and satisfied with that ending and that outcome of the book. Ultimately, though, I was a little bit disappointed with the lack of Brad in the second half of the book and the lack of Brad and Tommy meaningful interaction. We had about 2 scenes in the back half that were of them actively choosing to like communicate and be vulnerable with each other. And Brad really tried. There was a lot of instances where he tried to like get Tommy's attention, to try to talk to him about how he was feeling and things. And I definitely thought the ending was very cute with the whole prom scene and them kind of ending the book as like not necessarily dating, but just kind of taking things slow and kind of seeing where each other are at, and, you know, kind of dating the summer in between high school and college, which is a very weird time to be starting a new relationship with someone, for sure. I like to believe that they would stay together moving into college. I think they are a good match. Another kind of issue with just like the lack of Brad in general and Brad and Tommy scenes is that I just wish that Brad was in the book more for the second half, when it kind of becomes clear that that is the main romance that's going to be moving forward. Like, for instance, I thought of a couple times, like, why don't we have, well, I guess to give you like my, let me get comfortable, to give you my like brain working as I was reading this book, I was kind of looking at it like, if this was a movie adaptation of this book, like what would I change about it to make it slightly better? And one thing that I would do is obviously add more Brad scenes. And 2 of the specific ones that I thought to add would be actually when Tommy and Gabe, it's in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and Gabe texts Tommy that he is fighting with Vic and that he's just having a hard time, so they go out, have a day, and then end up kissing in the car, doing like a gift exchange. And what I would do to kind of insert Brad more and make it more obvious that he does have more significant feelings for Tommy, because I think that does come not out of left field, but, you know, like, it's very much more inferring, like I was doing, like, I hope that Brad's the endgame because he seems to be expressing more feelings in Tommy, but that's not explicitly in the narrative because we're strictly in Tommy's head. So if we were in a movie setting where we could be more of kind of an outside perspective, just observing this story, have Brad like walk up to them or kind of, like, catch them, almost like what I was thinking of the classic scene of, like, imagine we're watching this in a movie and Brad and Gabe are kissing in the car and the camera kind of spins or swings around and you see that Brad has, like, come up to Tommy's house with, like, a gift in his hand or something like that. Another instance I thought of them, you know, being brought closer together would be when Tommy has his accident of chopping his fingers off, and having Brad visit him in the hospital because he heard, like, through James or something that Tommy was hurt and he wanted to come check on him. Like, I think the fact that it took multiple weeks for Brad to find out that Tommy was injured, like when they're at this party trying to hook up, like, that was also another time where I feel like we could have had a little bit more of a deeper conversation, or I did not want that scene to be like an admitting of feelings when they were at that, like, end of the year party and sitting in the car. Like, I did not want their feelings to be admitted there for sure, but, like, that could have been an example of them already kind of being on the same page. And then I wish that we just would have been able to see their, like, after, like, I wish we had a longer conversation of them talking, like, after prom or something. But those were, like, the main things that I could think of, like, to improve it slightly. So that's ultimately why I landed on the 4-star rating. So, you know, this book was really solid. I definitely am going to read Eric J. Brown's next book as well. I don't know if there's one planned for a release this year, but if there is, you know, I'm definitely going to be looking into it and be anticipating it. And hopefully pick it up sooner than I end up getting to this one. But yeah, that's kind of it for spoilers for this. But yeah, let's kind of throw it to the wrap up here, and we will... All right, and now it is time to wrap up this whole video. So those were all 3 of the books that I read in this particular video. And just to give kind of some final wrap up thoughts on them, Something Wild and Wonderful, ultimately, like I said, I read this book a while ago, back in last summer, but it has stuck with me. I think some of the issues that I had with it then, still I feel now, so feelings have not changed too much, but ultimately I thought this was a super cute story, a super cute romance, and something that, like I said in the vlog portion, really explored some topics that I had not necessarily seen explored or even really thought to explore, such as religious trauma when relating to your sexuality, which is something that I personally never had to deal with, but I know a lot of other queer people, whether you're gay, lesbian, bisexual, you know, questioning, like, your gender identity, like, that can be really traumatic for people. So I really, really, like, not enjoyed, but appreciated those topics being explored, because it's something that just kind of totally flew over my head that I never really thought of kind of exploring in books before, because it's a little bit outside of my own lived and world experiences. But I'm definitely happy that I read that one, and I definitely would check out more work from Anita Kelly. And then the second book that we finished, I Like Me Better. I'm still just as confused as ever on my thoughts on this one. I haven't really parsed them out better as of yet, so I just don't really truthfully know how to wrap up this one super well. Ultimately was just, you know, like a 4-star read. I think I landed on a 4-star overall of, like, my final rating. It was lacking a little bit something. There was just some elements that really just did not fall perfectly into place for me. So, you know, I couldn't fully go there for, like, 5 stars, but, you know, like I've said multiple times in this video already and other videos, like my monthly wrap up for January, I definitely will be checking out more Robbie Weber, and I definitely recommend both of his books to a younger audience who's looking to get into some of those topics of exploring your sexuality and kind of exploring friendship in the YA setting. And then finally, the last one that I actually didn't give too much of a spoiler-free, like, review or thoughts on, A Lose You to Find Me. This one solidly is also a 4-star rating, and the topics in this one were also relating to things like grief, losing parents, coming to terms of your sexuality, and dealing with not accepting families of your sexuality. So this one also goes into some harder topics. This one also has a lot more emphasis, I would say, on the individual friendship relationships. While all of these books that I read obviously had important side characters and important friends, and kind of all of them hit that trope of like having arguments or disagreements with your friends, having a little bit of a falling out, you know, much like one does. I think all of them kind of were exploring the romance first, and while Something Wild and Wonderful was kind of your first relationship, like gay relationship, and why that's kind of explored slightly in here as well. That wasn't necessarily a unifying theme, but a unifying theme between all of them was family and acceptance of your own sexuality and your family's acceptance of that sexuality. And ultimately, not everyone is going to accept you all of the time, which does suck, but I think how it is handled in here is a little bit more dramatic than maybe some other places. But ultimately, for YA, I also think that this is pretty good representation on relationships and dealing with your own friendships and fallouts and kind of what it means when you're in a different state of life. You know, something that's explored more in here of having those high school seniors is that they're in their senior year versus I Like Me Better, where they're just getting into their senior year. So a lot of topic in here is kind of changing, evolving, having this idea and this dream of what you've always wanted, and then maybe that isn't actually what you want. And that's totally relatable, you know, being someone who went through the public school education system and kind of feeling this bit of a pressure to go to school, go to college, get a degree. While I really enjoyed that experience, I now work in higher education, and I definitely have a different, you know, philosophy and thought on it now. The fact that we not force, but really put a pressure on 17, 18-year-olds to pick a good college that they want to go to and know exactly what they want to do for the rest of their life is really difficult. And so I really enjoyed those aspects of this book as well. All right, and that is finally everything. So finally wrapping up this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of any of these books. I really enjoyed all three of them. I'm definitely happy that I read them, and I'm definitely planning on doing this sort of same video later on in the year. I'm thinking summertime ultimately, and I think I want to do something that's a little bit more of a spicy or steamy versus more YA stuff. I know Something Wild and Wonderful did have that more adult content, and I know I necessarily was not a fan of it, but I kind of want to test out that theory of like sex scenes in books and kind of how I ultimately feel and whether I'm a fade to black versus sex scene person. Not that you can't be both, but that's kind of what I'm hoping for out of my next reading experiment of this kind of sort. But if you did read any of these three books, definitely let me know, or let me know what you thought of them, and just let me know in general and kind of what your reading plans, and if you're planning on picking anything up specifically for Valentine's Day, because this is going up right before Valentine's Day as just a little bit of a romance mood setter. So yeah, thank you so much, and until next time, another video, I will talk to you then. Bye.